Hi, Laurence. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Merve? Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for accepting to be on my show. I really appreciate your work and everything. I have learned so much from you. It's a really exciting talk for me.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
I want to talk about democratization with you today because I know
Right.
how you are working on it and how Google is working on it with its products like Colab, for instance. So, what is your definition of democratization and why do we need it?
I don't know if I have a definition, to be honest, but I can say like really what I think about it and about democratization of AI. It's even hard to say. I look at AI as being a massive opportunity. And I've been in the tech business for quite some time, and I've seen like a number of revolutions in the tech business. I think the first big one in my career was movement towards the web. Prior to that, all application development was stuff that you wrote that got distributed via a CD or a floppy disk and was sold in a store. And then websites became the thing, and like whole new industries came out of
I'm
that.
kind of young for this, I guess, a little.
I know I'm showing my age here, and then like after that was like mobile, and like as things moved to mobile and the smartphone with the release of the iPhone and then Android following and a little bit of Windows Phone, but I won't talk about that. And just kidding. And then it was like there was also new workloads and new opportunities and new businesses came out of that. And I've been present for both of those revolutions. And now I see the AI revolution. And if I talk about both of those prior revolutions, is that they created a new platform on which apps could be built. And if we look at AI in the same way as a new platform in which apps can be built and new types of apps that we couldn't previously build now becoming possible. I always tell a joke inside of Google that prior to the smartphone revolution, we used to say to people that you never talk to strangers on the internet and you never get into a stranger's car. And then the smartphone came along, and it's an internet connected device with GPS in it, and we literally summon strangers from the internet and get into their car, right? And
Totally.
it changed everything. And I remember like I used to live in New York, and getting a taxi in New York City was really difficult. You'd stand on a street corner with your hand up, going taxi, 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 and hope that they would stop. But then, like the advent of smartphone-based applications, like with Uber or the various taxi apps, is you call and they come to you, and it's just so much nicer. So with AI, I see the same kind of thing that, if we look at AI as a platform in which new breeds of applications that we couldn't previously build are now possible, then there's massive opportunity there. And when there's massive opportunity, then becomes the opportunity to democratize and to go beyond the existing norms. So if I talk about like the first revolution was the web revolution, that it was like it relied on servers, and servers relied on operating systems, and the servers and the chips were built in one country, and the operating systems were all done in one country, and that revolution tended to center on that country, and that's here in the U.S. And while other places were able to take advantage of the web revolution, like the US and the US economy moving towards the dot-com and the tech economy, and all the tech giants are still in the US as a result. With AI, it doesn't actually have to be like that. And that's when I talk about democratization, that's how I look at it. Because the top frameworks for building AI applications are all open sourced.
Yes.
Anybody can use them anywhere. So then the difficulty then becomes how do you get people access to it? And you mentioned Colab. I think Colab is a great example of that. So now, like, you can just do it in the browser. You don't need to buy a GPU to be able to
Yeah,
train with a
exactly.
GPU. And then I think beyond that becomes education. And I think that was where when I started working with AI in Google, that was where I saw the biggest barrier of entry, was because how most people were talking about AI was very much, it was very much for the elite, right? You probably had to have a PhD. You probably needed to know like really really deep
Yeah, there's a
calculus and
lot
other
of
mathematics.
case keeping nowadays.
Absolutely. And, so I saw an opportunity to bust through that. And I think if we really want to open democratization of AI, it's no longer about getting access to the tools, because anybody can access them. It's no longer about, getting access to like a GPU to be able to train models, because almost anybody can do that. So then it was a case of, well, how do we make it easier for people to learn this? So then people all over the world will be able to pick up, these open source frameworks and use like a GPU in the cloud for free, and then be able to like learn and be able to build on AI. And that's kind of where I inserted myself into the mix. And I found that role, within Google, and Google were really, really supportive in helping me to, enhance that role and be able to bring AI to them, to far more people than had previously done. So and that's why I'm here.
There's still a lot of gatekeeping going on, and I don't know where the democratization is going nowadays, because like models are literally getting bigger and bigger. There's a trend, and I don't know where we are actually going with this.
Yeah.
Can you
So
predict?
I mean, maybe I'm different in my opinion on this than most people in the industry, but I find while research is getting bigger and bigger, and being able to handle the gigantic like language models and stuff like that, deployment of AI, I think, the best deployment of AI is actually getting smaller and smaller. So it's being able to build models that are very narrowly focused on a specific task. So for example, there's not that many companies in the world need a gigantic model that understands every language perfectly. But there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of startups that have a narrow focused solution that they want to be able to apply AI to. And then as AI gets used, I think more and more of it will be used by these smaller companies. Now, let me give an example of what I mean there. I'll talk about, instead of a language, I'll talk about image. And so gigantic models to be able to recognize many hundreds of thousands of classes of image, very few people have the resources to be able to train them. But very few people need that. I'll give an example. I spoke with a startup a couple of years ago, which they had a really innovative solution, and it was around safety on building sites. And it turns out that like building sites have to spend a lot of resources with people walking around the building site to make sure everybody's wearing safety gear. You're not wearing a helmet, you have to wear a helmet. You're not wearing an alert jacket, you have to wear an alert jacket. And if they don't do that, then the people who are insuring them won't insure them. So then if an accident happened and they weren't insured, it's disastrous. So they actually applied AI to that problem by just using a basic image classifier that they put on a drone, and the drone could fly around the building site, and then like it could recognize, three classes. Class number one is person is wearing helmet and safety vest. Class number two is person is wearing safety vest but no helmet. Class number three is person's wearing helmet but no safety vest. And they were able to save like so much money and time and effort, being able to build an image classifier that do that and transform their industry. So it's like, so to me, that kind of transformation and the people who will be able to build businesses around that kind of transformation, it looks like it's more around smaller models and not the gigantic models. So I'm still very optimistic about the democratization.
I completely agree, because like most of the business problems actually require domain specific solutions, and these solutions are like kind of small. Let me give you an example. I used to make chatbots that were used to schedule some bookings with service companies. Currently, I'm basically developing a friend. It's like, I don't know if you ever heard, but it's like replica with like a different version. It's kind of hard for me right now, because like, you have to do you have to cover like everything, because like you are building a human, but like it's a rare case, because most of the companies actually develop chatbots for automating their processes, whether there are banks, they can be booking companies like hotel booking companies, they can be, I don't know, like food ordering companies to automate their processes. So like most of their data actually is not really general, like those language models that are developed, like generative ones that have all the internet in the world. And I mean, even if you needed that, you can actually like shrink it, like, make distillation and other stuff. I also really like, like playing with pre-trained models, because like they save you from huge amount of work and you know, like need to collect data and everything. But like as they get bigger, I feel like we will not be able to utilize them, because like some of them, as you know, are like close access. Like
Right.
today I had to do some data augmentation, by the way, and I fell in love with the T5 model. You know T5, right? It's I mean it was awesome. And it was just for the task, and it was already fine-tuned, and I just used it, you know, on the collab, and it was like super easy, and I feel like, you know, that's democratization.
Yeah, and like if you're not able to use the full model, one of the things that we're pretty passionate about is like we have the TensorFlow Hub where we store repositories of models. But if you're not able to use the full model, it's also to be able to use things like feature vectors from the model.
Yes,
So that you can do transfer
embeddings.
learning on that, or like pre-embedded word encoding, what was it? Pre-learned word embeddings. Got that sentence wrong.
Pre-trained word embeddings, I guess, right?
Right, and you know, and those kind of things. So it's like, yes, you may not be building the model with, like, you don't have access to 100 million images or 100 million
Yes.
words to be able to train this, but if you can take those pre-trained embeddings and then use them within your own model, or those pre-trained feature vectors and use them within your own model, it's really useful. And I speak a lot with people who are mobile developers and web developers who are not ML people. But they know that they need to use ML within their apps. And that, to me, that being able to use the pre-trained stuff is the key to that, because, you know, they're able to take advantage of, for example, with an image model, pre-learned feature vectors, which use a pretty sophisticated convolutional neural network in the back end. But they've no idea what a convolutional neural network is. They don't know if they want to learn one or not. If they want to get into that and learn that, it's great. We try to help them with that. But for most people, it's like, I just need something that can recognize images. I shouldn't have to learn all of these things. And that's where, like, being able to use these pre-trained models, or these pre-trained chunks of models, to be able to do something simple yourself and focus it, I think is really powerful and really important. And you brought up one thing earlier, which is domain specific. And that, I think, is particularly important. You know, even when I was talking about, I think the future is in smaller models. And let me give an example of that. It's something that I'm actually working on at the moment for helping people to learn. And that is, if you consider, for example, websites that accept text, like chat rooms or those kind of things, that people can be toxic. People can say horrible, nasty things. And it's a really difficult job for you, if you're running that website, to be able to maintain that, to stop people from doing it, to administer that, to delete messages and all those kind of things. But ML on the front end can actually be used there, where it'll say, hey, you know what you're saying right now is kind of toxic. Maybe you want to rephrase it, and not allow them to actually send it up into the cloud. So, you know, there are general toxic models that can be used for that. But the example that I'm trying to teach people about is, okay, you can use a general toxic model like that, but then within your particular community, there's specific toxicity. And as a joke, and I hope this makes it into like some release that we do, but as a joke, it's like I say, well, if you're building a chat room, but then you're building it for the Irish audience, because I did some of my childhood growing up in Ireland, that there's particular toxic slang in Ireland that doesn't exist anywhere else. You know, like, you know, you call somebody an Egypt, and like most people don't understand that. And a general model doesn't understand that. So how do you then train a model for that specific domain case? And that's where the model is small. And again, that's where I'm like just driving that. I think really the value of the future and is building the smaller domain specific models. And again, that drives democratization. At least in my opinion, it does. So then it's like you'd have the general toxicity filter, and then you'd have the specific toxicity filter for your community. And so I think, you know, that to me is the
That's a
future.
nice use
And
case.
yeah.
I always like when I watch your videos and everything. First of all, I feel like your book and your videos are like totally for non-statistics people backgrounds a little, but mostly for software developers who want to get into it, you know, like that's how I felt when I was watching your videos and reading your book and everything. Also, I mean, your book is called, I mean, for coders. So
Yeah,
we will
exactly.
get to that. But people really do take democratization for granted, in my opinion. So like, why should we care about why democratization matters? Do you have an answer for that? I also have my own answers, but like, I want to listen from you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a case of, because I had a very difficult entry into the business at the beginning of my career, and there were various blockers stopping me, and there were various gatekeepers stopping me. So as a result, I really want to make sure that this industry that I'm in now, that I do everything in my power to make it easier for people to avoid the kind of problems that I had. Some of them were just because of a result of technology immaturity. Some of them were systemic, that kind of thing. But so when thinking about democratization, it's like, the more, there was a quote that I once heard, I'm trying to remember, it was like, every additional voice enriches us and every lost voice diminishes us. And, when the voices that we're using to enrich us are only coming from very small places where people have the opportunity to do it, then the community as a whole loses out. The community as a whole begins to look like Silicon Valley plus England plus maybe a bit of China, that kind of thing. Whereas, if we can provide a place where voices, non-traditional voices, can enrich us, and I see myself as one of those non-traditional voices, because I came from a crazy background. I lived in 4 countries before I was 8 years old, learned to speak 4 different languages, generally more the blue collar type rather than the academic type, that kind of stuff. But I was able to come into the community and enrich it. And, there's nothing special about me. And so why, if I can do it, why not somebody from Africa, somebody from South America, somebody from Turkey, somebody from India, somebody from China, somebody from Russia, Korea, Japan, all of these kind of places, to be able to enrich the community with their viewpoint and do what I can to remove any blockers towards that.
That's awesome. In my perception, it's more like, for the company's perspective, like, if the smaller companies or like middle-scaled companies or startups cannot access to AI, which is currently not the case, but if we go for the democratization, it will be. If they cannot utilize this, then they will not be able to be as competent as big tech. So like, that's kind of why I care about it. Plus, there was this example you have given on cassava plants.
Yes.
The use of it in developing countries, people have old phones, and they might not have fast internet or anything. So like, we need to I feel like we need to get them involved as well, so that they can find solutions to their day-to-day problems.
Absolutely.
That was a nice one, by the way, if you want to explain also.
So you're referring to cassava. So the cassava project was really interesting to me because in Tanzania, at least where we worked with the folks there, was that the farmers generally grow a cash crop, and the cash crop they sell in the market, and they use that to pay for their housing, send their kids to school, those kind of things. But they'll have a backup crop, which is cassava, and which is easy to grow. And so if their cash crop fails, at least with their backup crop, they won't starve. The problem with cassava, like with any backup, if your backup fails, you're in big trouble. But cassava is very susceptible to blight. And one of the things that was discovered, that once you see that a particular leaf is blighted, then it's too late, not just for that plant, but for all of the other plants around it. You may not see the blight in those yet, but once you can see it in one plant, it's too late. So, but it turned out that early diagnosis of blight was possible using an image classifier. And it was possible using an offline model, because these folks don't have like 5G cloud connectivity from their cell phones. And so use an offline model that you could put on a cheap Android device, and then farmers could just take a picture of the leaf.
Offline light model.
Offline light model. I mean, those are the magic words. Off-light model, yeah. Those are the magic words for democratization. And as a result, it's a beautiful solution that really helped out those farmers. And talking about innovation at local scale, while it's not an AI solution, a guy from Africa told me a solution that he had worked on that I thought was amazing, and it was also for farmers. And it turns out that farmers grow crops that they sell at a market. but they don't necessarily know what the price is at the market. And as a result, it's like, do I harvest my crop today and bring it to the market? And then once I get to the market, I find out that I'm not going to get a great price. Or do I work through a middleman? And this middleman would like kind of say, well, the price at the market is X. Sell me your crop now and I will sell it at the market. Whereas the price at the market is actually maybe much, much higher. So this one person built this innovative solution that for every farmer that they could subscribe to an SMS-based system, so text messages. And what it would do is that this software company would look at the price of every crop in every market every day and text it to the farmer. And as a result, it cut out the middleman. It meant that the farmer wasn't having any profits kind of gouged by people in the middle. And they could say, well, if I go to that market, I will get this price. If I go to that market, I'll get this price. So it put the power back in their hands to be able to decide, do I go to the market today and which one do I go to? And that was the application of very primitive technology with SMS, right? Just text messaging, and somebody built an application on top of that. So what kind of applications can we build with better technology, like with AI, with language processing, with vision processing and all those kind of things, and democratize it and focus it on narrow needs like these ones? And so that's why I'm still going to argue that the future of AI is small, not giant. And when it is small, we can really, really work on democratization and making people's lives better with it.
Future of AI is tiny.
Yep.
Coming to that one, I bought this TinyML kit, but I have zero idea about how to build robots, or people told me, why didn't you buy Raspberry Pi? Why didn't you buy XY? Why did you buy Arduino? And I was like, I have zero idea. And there is this course about it that is going to get me started. So why not? So I always wanted to do this, and I had zero idea on where should I start. So I really appreciate that. Can you talk about it a little?
Sure. So we worked with Harvard University and their edX platform to put together this course on TinyML. One of my colleagues, Pete Warden, has written a book on TinyML, and that was really the foundation of the course. The idea with TinyML, as opposed to small ML, is really to work on embedded systems and microcontrollers. So when you think about the kind of devices that need embedded systems or microcontrollers, and to be able to make them smarter. Earlier, I spoke about the folks who were doing the image classifier for a building site, to be able to detect hard hats or safety vests and those kind of things. And but think about, what if the smarts, instead of an application reading from the camera and then running a classifier on a chip like a Raspberry Pi, what if that intelligence could be built into the camera itself? And that's really the idea behind TinyML. So instead of a camera taking a picture and feeding it to something that will do the classification, that you actually design a camera specifically to say, this person is not wearing a safety hat. And that's the idea behind TinyML. And so being able to put that kind of smart inference-based software on increasingly smaller systems opens up a whole new level of applications. I don't think it's quite as democratized as the more software-based AI that we've been talking about, because it requires the hardware, and it requires you to be able to access chips and make chips and those kind of things. But with folks like Raspberry Pi and Arduino, trying to drive down the cost of that to put it into the hands of more developers, we're certainly getting there. And and that's really the idea behind the course. So while there are hundreds of millions of computers, and there are billions of mobile devices, there are tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, of embedded systems. So given that there's the hardware explosion there, that to be able to put your AI skills to use in those tiny scenarios is really useful.
Well, I have zero idea about C++. I took C when I was in the college, but I'm mainly a Python developer. So hopefully I will get things right, because I really want to develop something that is, concrete in a way, not industry applications, but something smaller and something that is going to like, I'm doing this for fun basically, but like this
Right.
was one of my 2021 resolutions. I bought it, one for me and one for my statistically significant other for Valentine's Day. So we were like trying to spend time with it. Also, I would like to say, I would like to talk to you about your book as well.
Sure.
I went through it. I also have the book of Aurelian Geron. Am I spelling
Aurelian,
it right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
That
great
book,
book.
that's like my go-to book with TensorFlow. Totally. I got it for the 2.0. Previously I had 1.0 and then I got it for 2.0 because like I was like, I cannot miss it.
Yeah.
There is not much applications in that book on TF Lite, I guess, and like TinyML
Yeah.
stuff. This one has more applications in my opinion, and this one is a little bit more basic, but like for like beginners. And then that one is like a little bit more advanced. So like
Yeah.
I reviewed the books and everything. So like this one is actually like a great book for people who want to start TensorFlow, in my opinion. So like what made you go for it? You know, like I really want to hear about that.
Yeah, I think you pretty much captured it. I adored Aurelian's book. I've worked with Aurelian, great guy, fabulous writer, brilliant book. And but it was like, to me, the book was excellent if you already knew some ML and you wanted to
Yes.
be able to kind of put that, and learn the best techniques for doing it and learn how an LSTM works or a CNN works and those kind of things. And I was like, what the world needs is a book for people to read, that once they finish that book, they will really appreciate Aurelian's book. And so I was like, that to me was the gap. And so when I spoke with the publishers, that was the pitch that I gave them, and they agreed. And that was generally how I like to teach AI and ML. It's AI and ML for coders as opposed to AI and ML for ML practitioners. And so I pitched the book that way. We ended up it's funny you mentioned TensorFlow Lite and mobile, that the book as pitched got to be way too big. So we actually split it in two. So the first one is the AI and ML for coders that you're talking about, that you're showing, and that's like for building models and basic deploying them. The second book, which I'm working on right now, I hope to have done by this summer, is really kind of to dive down for mobile developers, to look at the scenarios for mobile developers, and to be much more an Android, iOS oriented book. So earlier we spoke about, for example, transfer learning using pre-trained embeddings and that kind of stuff, to kind of really speak to that audience. So, hey, I'm not going to teach you how a CNN works, but I will teach you how to use an image model that was built using CNN so that you can drop it into your Android or iOS app, that type of thing. So
there is
yeah,
like
that's it.
there is like totally a gap for the books that actually include real nice applications. There's actually one over there. It's Kara's book, but it's not TensorFlow book. It also includes like examples, like for instance, like IMDb example, feminist example, etc. But like this one is like full of know-hows and everything. I would like to thank you for accepting to be on my video today. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Merve. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
See ya.
Bye.